again, everyone, and welcome to our session about why diversity matters for climate advocacy. And because we only have 30 minutes from this talk, we also won't be able to take questions. But once again, please don't hesitate to reach out at the email addresses we'll provide at the end. We will be your speakers today. I am Princella Talley. I'm a development associate with CCL's development team, and I'm also a diversity outreach coordinator.
And I'm Karina Ramirez. I'm CCL's Diversity Outreach Manager. We're welcome to have you in a conversation today. What we're going to talk about today is going to deal with representation and why it matters, the impact on climate solutions, and the societal and personal impact that this work entails. So a little bit about me. This is me, a little bit of me. I am a mom. I was born in Ecuador. I used to be a dancer a while back, and I'm also a very enthusiastic postcard collector. Talking about why that matters. It matters because I wanted you to get to know a little bit of where I'm from, because representation does matter. We live in a country that is extremely diverse. So in order to organize, unify, and empower communities, we need to be able to be good advocates and advocates on their behalf. Representation also matters because our communities need the voices, opinions, and help of people of many different groups. And we reach out to them, and more than likely they are soon to become involved with us, and they will help us in the work. Their picture on your left is Solemi Hernandez. She is one of our most avid volunteers. If you've seen her in the plenary, you would know that she's a community advocate for the Naples area here in Florida. She joined CCL in 2017, and she found out about us through another organization she was volunteering for at the time. So Lemmy had brought all of her experience dealing with community groups and advocacy to CCL. Through her, we have received a lot of endorsements in the Florida area. She has made other communities aware of Citizen Climate Lobby, and she started this as a volunteer, and she is now leading the Southeast region for CCL. Again, representation matters and matters greatly. This is how I see my work. I have made, in my lifetime, I've been in spaces where I've just been surrounded by girls and women. So I am definitely a product of my experience. I also do CCL work and volunteer in my community. I've been volunteering since I was 14 years old. A lot of my work has concentrated again on being around women and girls. A lot of that had to do maybe with the fact that I'm the only female at my house. And although I learned a lot from my mother, I didn't grow up seeing women take leadership roles. So from a young age, I went to seek for these women where I can learn from. And then once I learned an activity, an opportunity, I also passed that forward to other people. So community work has been an essential aspect of my life. So how does that tie into CCL? So through this diversity work that we're now embarking in, we want to have a place where everybody belongs. We want people to be active participants in the democracy to achieve our overall goal to have that livable world that we also desire. So what can you do in your local chapter in your region? Talk a little bit about inclusiveness. For starters, what a lot of our speakers have been saying during this track, be ready to be uncomfortable. And one of those things is like, don't question the experience of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We all have different experiences and we bring those in different spaces. There's not a person that I don't know in my circle that have been not discriminated against, or someone who has not suffered a microaggression. We live that, and we live that daily. So when you hear this inside your chapters, as we were mentioning earlier, do the opportunity, have a chance to just listen and learn and be understanding. Also put yourself in situations where, you might be unfamiliar, make yourself visible. tell that person that you want to engage with them. As well, I'm inviting people through this work to learn from them, but go beyond their food and festivals, right? That's normally the first thing that we would go and notice about a person, right? But I also invite you to look at people's values and their beliefs and look deep into the culture so that you can understand their perspective. There are many traditions that go beyond the festival and the food, and sometimes that can give you some incredible conversations that will allow you to learn about other people. Additionally, I ask, don't let other people get away with biased language. If you are going to be that ally that we all need, we need you to be defenders as well. We have grown up listening to things. I know I've grown up listening to things in my own community, and now I am asking you to help us move away from that. If we have done these things in our chapters, like, I don't know, say something that just wouldn't be nice about another person from another race, I ask you to please be active and do not allow that to continue anymore. I wanted to give you a checklist of behavior. So I have finished a course on diversity and inclusion because it involves my work, but also it has given me good perspectives on things that I would like to see inside our chapters. So they talk about inclusive and exclusive behavior. I want us to be an organization that is responsible not only to ourselves, to each other, but our fellow volunteers. So I'm going to ask you to start checking your behaviors. So what is an inclusive behavior? Going out of the way to make others feel welcome. Showing genuine concern towards your team members. Making an extra effort to understand problems faced by others. We're seeing what is happening in the world around us. We're seeing this in our communities. We cannot completely disassociate ourselves from what is happening. What is an exclusive behavior? Downplaying the value of other people's contributions. Interrupting or cutting others off while speaking. Failing to acknowledge or showing little interest in the ideas and opinions expressed by someone else. Let me repeat that one once again. Failing to acknowledge or showing little interest in the ideas or opinions expressed by someone else. I cannot tell you in how many spaces I've been when this has personally happened to me. And my immediate reaction is to cut myself off, to completely disengage, to not want to participate. And I could have done that the minute I walked into a CCL, right? Completely being scared and seeing that I was probably the only person of color at the time. But you know what happened? Someone actually went out of their way to make me feel welcome and included. And that's why I stayed. I am a big fan of Maya Angelou. I love her idea of just having something resembling a tapestry. What is something that we would want to have? We should all know that diversity makes for a rich tapestry. And we must understand that all the threads of that tapestry are equal in value, no matter what their color. And with this, I will pass on to Princella.
Thank you, Karina. So as we talk about diversity and inclusion here and consider this moment we're in our history, we have to internalize how strong and important the call for diversity and inclusion is, because these aren't just trending words, and true diversity and inclusion begins with a personal commitment to challenge our own biased thoughts and exclusive behaviors, as Karina mentioned. We also should come to terms with the lack of diversity and the widespread consequences it has, both locally and across the world. So to let you know a little bit more about me, my diversity work is primarily done in the Third Coast region in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And my national work is within the Climate and Culture Action Team, where we focus on intersectionality between climate and other community issues. But my shared priority, as I said earlier, is to always engage young people and adults in economically disadvantaged areas. Okay, so I'm gonna hit you guys with a little bit of information overload, and I'm gonna talk a little fast, so bear with me, and I'll have a resource sheet with links to all of the studies I mentioned. So let's start with how a lack of diversity negatively affects our society in general, and then we'll narrow it down to how it impacts our climate solutions work and how it affects personal people's lives, including my own. So beginning in this lack of diversity chart we're looking at, we're going to start with the lack of diversity affecting higher education and employment. So when the JED Foundation and the Steed Fund surveyed 1,500 college freshmen in 2016, they found that 50% of white students felt more academically prepared than their peers, and only 36% of Black students felt that way. 57% of Black students said that college wasn't living up to their expectations, compared to 47% of white students. And 75% of Black college students responded that they tend to keep their feelings about the difficulty of college to themselves, in comparison to 61% of white students. So in March of 2018, it was revealed that African American students were 338% more likely to be suspended than their white peers in the state of Minnesota. A separate national study noted that while African American boys represented 8% of all enrolled students, they account for 25% of suspensions and 23% of expulsions. Likewise, African American girls made up 8% of all students, but they accounted for 14% of suspensions and 10% of expulsions. At some schools comprised mostly of students of color, you'll find more law enforcement officers, but you might find no counselors. And with a bit of research into the schools to prison pipeline, you easily find that there's a strong link between leaving high school and being in prison later in life. In regards to employment, white applicants are more likely to land interviews. White sounding or white seeming names on paper continue to be associated with more professional experience. And over the past 40 years, Black workers have consistently endured an unemployment rate that is approximately twice that of their white counterparts, regardless of their educational attainment. And it was the Center for American Progress that compiled this information from various studies. Pew Research found that when it comes to trust in government and individuals, high levels of trust in white Americans is double in comparison to African American trust levels. So I can't sum this up any better than the book, Trust in Black America. And the synopsis of that book states, and I quote directly, "The more citizens trust their government, the better democracy functions. However, African Americans have long suffered from the lack of equal protection by their government, and racial discrimination they have faced breaks down their trust in democracy. Rather than promoting democracy, the United States government has, from its inception, racially discriminated against African American citizens and other racial groups, denying them equal access to citizenship and to protection of the law. Civil rights violations by ordinary citizens have also tainted social relationships between racial groups, social relationships that should be meaningful for enhancing relations between citizens and the government at large. Thus, trust and democracy do not function in American politics the way they should, in part because trust is not colorblind. The disempowerment, it happens to countless individuals because such frequent exposure to racism, rejection, and stereotyping often leads us to self-stereotype, which means we start to reject our own culture and dislike ourselves because we give in to these negative societal beliefs that often seem to lead the majority opinion and makes us feel like our voices are just not as valuable. So if you're interested in a concrete example of what can result from biased thinking when there's a lack of diversity, we can look at the field of psychiatry. African Americans are more likely to be treated for mental illnesses that they don't have and overlooked for the ones that they do have. And while our risks for some issues are higher than the average for other groups, cultural stereotyping leads to more frequent misdiagnosing. And this mistreatment could be reduced simply by having more diverse leadership in the field. And finally, anyone who is often made to feel isolated based on all these preconceived notions, or just by being who they are, there's so much mental energy and physical energy that goes towards avoiding these stressors. And so many things we have to worry about within a day that our values and priorities do not look the same as yours in a lot of cases. So we have so much work to do. But as Mary Parker Follett has said, unity, not uniformity, must be our aim. And we attain unity only through variety. Differences must be integrated, not annihilated and not absorbed. So without diversity, we are more open to unstable and corrupt political environments due to the lack of adequate representation for marginalized groups. Writer Tyra A. Mariani explains in New America's article, Hidden Staffers, Why Diversity in Government Matters. She says, time and time again, from corporations to government and other civic entities, we see missteps by leaders and organizations and other civic entities and government because we fail to consider how people of various backgrounds might view their message or how they might be affected by a given policy. They've either offended particular groups by their insensitivity, missed a market opportunity due to their lack of awareness or cultural needs and relevance, or seen policies that produce unintended negative consequences for the very groups they're trying to help. Thus far, I've mentioned a range of disparities, and until we have the cultural competency we need and the courage to work towards closing these gaps and working against these inequities, climate education will not be the priority. And I'd like to ask you, why should it be when we consider all these things at play? So we have to decide to collectively work for the good that elevates underrepresented voices and not work against them by deciding these are not your issues or deciding that a stable climate can somehow be mutually exclusive to advocating for a more stable coexistence of diverse cultures in our society. So it's quite a heavy load when you enter spaces and you're immediately designated as the voice for all Black people, or the voice for all people in any group. Karina already said this, we are all different people with unique experiences and different points of view, and constantly engaging in these stressful situations keeps the flight or fight response turned on. It triggers depression and anxiety. It puts us at higher risk of chronic health issues, such as cardiovascular problems and higher blood pressure. And if you're unfamiliar with what an assimilation conflict is, I'll do my best to summarize it. So cultural assimilation can be defined as the process in which a minority group or a culture comes to resemble the dominant group or assume the values, behaviors, and beliefs of another group. And this assimilation tends to directly conflict with our innate cultural values, practices, and norms. So at this time, I'm going to be a bit more vulnerable with you all and be really honest in sharing what this looks like for me as a person. In my life, this looks like me giving people who look similar to me an empowerment speech about making their voice heard, while at the same time telling them to be careful about how they use their words, because someone of a different political party could take what they say the wrong way. What it looks like for me is making sure to move my hands less often when I speak, or not wearing my backwards caps anymore, because it could be deemed as inappropriate based on what the majority group defines as socially acceptable. It's me lightening my voice and pretending to be happy all the time when I'm not, so that I won't be considered the angry Black woman or deemed as problematic. And it's me not wearing my hair braided for almost a year until I have a signal that it's okay to do so as a working professional, because there are still so many people who find that to be unprofessional. And then at the end of those days, I switch back to my usual self. And no one who knows me well questions that, because they understand that it's all part of what many of us have to do to have successful careers, to minimize conflicts, and to reduce the discomforts of other people who just may not understand us. So those personal impacts I mentioned, they can feel overwhelming, but I do want to be clear that I'm not feeling defeated, and none of us have to feel that way. I am honestly very hopeful, and I see so much change happening around us because so many people are standing up right now to become more understanding and to embrace those differences in order to change things for the better. And one place I'm working to do that is within the Climate and Culture Action Team, where we have various demographics coexisting to create change for a more livable world. You can look us up on community, and you're welcome to join us as an ally. And as I mentioned earlier, I have a resource sheet for all of those studies and many stats I threw at you guys. So feel free to email me for that sheet. And on that note, I am happy to pass it back to our amazing diversity manager, Karina Ramirez. Thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much, Princella. Following up and talking about the different affinity groups that we have. So climate and culture is one that started in 2019. We also have the Latino Faction team, started in 2017. It used to be the Spanish language team inside CCL. Last year, it was the birth of the PGM caucus, which is the people of the global majority. It's a closed group and it's only for people of color, because we wanted to create a safe space inside CCL so that we can support each other. This year, we have the rebirth of the LGBTQA+ action team. The team started in 2019, but it sort of stopped doing work and sort of reevaluated itself. So as of a month ago, is beginning to have meetings again. And I will be providing that information to you when you email me down there to diversity@citizensclimate.org. Another team that we have, and this is a team that just, again, starting in the last couple of weeks, is the Asian Pacific Action Team. It's a new team, is being led by four wonderful leaders, and they have a schedule, their first meeting on June 25th. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. We have 10 minutes, is that right?
That is true.
So we have 10 minutes left.
I have a question here in the chat. Lisa is asking, what would be the best first step for us to take to be an ally who are in the majority?
You want to take that, Princella?
Oh, I will take that. Yeah, I would recommend, first, as we've all said, listening. Reach out to communities that you may feel like you are the minority that may make you uncomfortable. No one's going to oppose you coming there to listen and learn more, and do your homework. We can't expect people of color to always tell us what the next step is or give us that cultural context. We have to do our homework and then go from there.
And I would add, after you do your homework, defend the people around you. Sometimes we see things inside the organization. I have the unfortunate incident of listening to things that have happened inside CCO, which is, incredibly enough, part of the reason why I have this role, because I was trying to address the situations that have happened. Anything from participants not being able to actively participate in lobby meetings, to just people just saying not nice things. So if you happen to be in that room, defend the person that is there. We, incredibly enough, we do incredible work in this organization to be able to learn what we need to learn, to talk to our elected officials. And we do that with respect and admiration. So I've been talking a lot for the last 6 months about how we need to do that among ourselves. That's the only thing I ask. All we're doing really in this kind of work is just putting a human face to what we're trying to do. We are talking about that we can't separate ourselves from what is happening around us. We cannot longer continue to do that if we were doing that before. And you can be the best ally you can be by stepping up, supporting people around you, and actively going to the communities where you live. I cannot stress this enough. When I came to CCL, one of the first things I did was did like a demographic survey of where I was living, because I was noticing that a lot of the places where we were going to do outreach did not include my local community Latino center. And it did not include the Hispanic Heritage Festival, at least not in my area at the time, right? So I went out of my way to go to those spaces because it's a non-traditional space. But you know what? I felt that the people that were going to those events have the right to know that we have an organization that's devoted to climate solution, and that we are supporting a bill that is going to affect every single American in this country. So why wouldn't I go to my community center, to my church, and all of these other places to tell them about the kind of work that we're doing?
Okay, I have another question for you guys from Ellie. She says, have you guys noticed lots of people asking you what they can do to not be racist, and how has that impacted your mental health? How has that more recent and more concentrated burden affected you, and how are you doing?
I have my tissue box. I was not planning on crying, and I will not do it. Um, you know what? It's been a hard couple of months. COVID made the situation that was already happening in our communities extremely worse. We were already seeing it. The minute they had any situation happen here, I'm in Florida. So, as you may have seen in the news, my state hasn't been the best respondent to the solutions, and it hasn't been a good respondent, I feel, to the communities of color. So when I was mentioning earlier about how I volunteer with the girls that are in a Guatemalan area, they have a center called the Guatemalan Center. And I went there just because I knew that they were in the community. And since I've always volunteered, I wanted to give myself back. But you know what happened inside that center when COVID started? They were not getting any single information from the state about how to take care of themselves. Something as simple as wash your hands. These are the steps that you need to take. Because in that center, the majority of the population speaks at least 4 different types of Mayan languages. So they didn't have anything. So I spent a portion of maybe March, April, helping a group called the Mayan Girls, which is a group of high school girls that are translating information that is coming from the state that goes to the center, and translating that from English to Spanish so that the girls could translate to the Mayan languages. So that was my way of giving back and contributing something to help them. That has kept me up at night because I'm thinking, are they getting the information they need? How can I help? And how do I do that when I am personally afraid to go out? In addition to that, trying to be strong for other people is such a Latino thing to do. I've grown up that way. So finding myself in times where I am like personally crying, or I'm turning off the Zoom video because, I don't want other people to see me that vulnerable. It just put me in a completely different space. So I have moments where I just like go and cry and just do that because I need to let it out. And then I have moments of anger, and nothing that we have seen from COVID to the protests to what is happening in our country has made me feel better outside of the work that we do inside CCL, right? Because we have this common goal that we're trying to address something that is affecting so many people. So I put my hope in that, but it's not an innocent space to be with. And I'm also like, I'm your diversity manager. So all the questions have been coming to me, and I have been trying to the best of my abilities to answer them. And I will. And sometimes you will get an answer from me, and sometimes you don't. And if you don't get it from me right away, it's not because I don't love you, because I am filled with love. It's just that this time I need to take a little bit of moment for myself. Princella?
Well, what it's done for me is it's really pushed me to a new level of honesty. Whereas I spent a lot of time trying to keep everyone comfortable, that for the most part has gone away. And I realized that the priority is to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to just show you who I am. And then you can decide, do I really want to commit to integrating these differences, or do I want to just absorb them and not deal with them? And I've left that choice up to people, because I feel like sometimes people say, well, this is what I want to do. I want to be anti-racist. But in the moments where we have to really own up to the biases we have, we step back and we go into denial. And so I feel like that's a lot of things people have to work on their own. And there's a lot of anti-racist trainings out there. But I think a lot of times, and that's why I have so much respect for Karina being there for everyone, because I have actively decided I need to be there for the people who are suffering the most from these things. And at that same time, I can't deal with everyone else asking me what to do who doesn't suffer from it as much. So it's a mix of really loving and appreciating people for wanting to make those steps, but also trusting that I don't have to hold their hand to do it. So as we take care of our communities, the best thing you can do is continue to educate yourself, accept our differences, and I mean, sometimes I'll answer and sometimes I won't, because that's my personality type. I'm a bit more avoidant when things have hit a point of, why are you asking me? You can learn this. And Karina has a lot of resources that she shares with people who need to educate themselves. And then we can all come back and sit together and figure out how we can move forward. But hand-holding from the beginning, I just can't do that. So it hasn't affected me as much, because I had to make an active choice of where I would be during this time.
In the 1 minute that we have left, I want to let you know that we will be working on a series of different conversations to deal with different topics. So don't feel that they're not going to be addressed. It's a work in progress. I started this position in January, and we have been doing a lot of things, but those things are coming, and you will hear about them. So it's 3:30. Thank you so much for being in this session, and the diversity track continue. So we are going to take a break.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.